SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of the day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
Little weather moving into the area this coming Saturday. Somebody turned the air conditioner on out there this morning. Little change from yesterday. The last couple of days, monsoon-like, I would say, across central Mississippi.
Oh, it's just a mild 30-degree swing.
Man. And then the weather coming in this Saturday calls for some severe storms, right? Possibility.
Potentially, yeah.
Of tornadoes as well. Don't like to see that. But yesterday after the show, Rhino, we headed out. I know you had to stay back and do the show with Rebecca. Good things. We headed out to Broadmoor Baptist Church in Madison, and there was where we held a celebration of Paul Gallo's life. It was really well done. I got to tell you, kudos to all those who attended, and especially those who spoke, as we remembered the incredible life and contributions of our brother in broadcasting, the great Paul Gallo. His family clearly moved. His son and daughter did a fantastic job of just chronicling his life and his contributions and his being their father, of course. Numerous high-profile elected officials also offered remarks. Of course, they're all friends with Paul. He interviewed them all. They're all friends with him. And they recalled many of those experiences. Governors Haley Barbour and Phil Bryant, Speaker of the House Philip Gunn, Attorney General Lynn Fitch. I may leave somebody out. Ricky Matthews, of course. Steve Holland. Robert Johnson from the Democrat side of the aisle. And they very eloquently offered that Paul was always fair in his interviews of them and his discussions with them. And I can't remember which of the speakers discussed the situation. I think it may have been Steve himself. You've seen this before with Perez sitting in your seat in the producer's booth, and Steve and Paul would be going at it, and they just keep on right through the break, not even being on the air, and Perez in your seat waving his hands as he liked to do. Hey, we're off the air. Oh, man. So just kind of recalling some of those fun times, honestly, because Paul was also quite entertaining and had a great sense of humor. And Paul liked to say, I know a lot of people out there may disagree with what I say here and what my positions are, but that's okay. Just keep tuning in and listening. And that's spot on. That's what it's all about. So just a fantastic way, I thought, to recall and celebrate and present a chronology of his life. It was just fantastic. Steve Azar, of course, made some comments as well. He's kind of ill, but he made comments through his song, One Mississippi. And, Paul was inspirational in creating that song as well. He felt like we needed something new. But everybody did a great job, and it was just good to be part of that and to witness that. And I thought it was a very fitting and appropriate service and celebration, really, of a man who honestly heavily influenced the political landscape in this state. And make no mistake, our delegation in Washington tuned in a lot, listened to what he had to say, and often would act based on what they would hear on his show, his opinion, his interviews with his guests. I think that it goes to show you, Rhino, that this medium is far from dead. In fact, it's thriving. And you know that, and we are blessed to be part of it and to sit in these chairs and to bring you this show every day. And I think it's safe to say that Mr. Gallo, he paved the way for all of us. He got this started a long time ago. He convinced the ownership here that there was a market for what he wanted to do, and he was right. And they let him go at it. The dean of talk radio in the state of Mississippi, the great Paul Gallo, he will be missed. No doubt about that. But again, a very fitting ceremony yesterday, and just hearing all of the history of the various people associated with the show from a guest's perspective was really fascinating and just good to hear. Just a lot of good people that were offering their, not so much condolences, but really just offering their praise for a life well lived, and their respect and their gratitude for his influence, his efforts, his contributions to our state, to our nation. And again, maybe you don't agree, and a lot of people didn't, with everything he stood for and everything he said and all of his opinions. It's because they're opinions. We don't expect complete congruence. But one thing that cannot be denied, the man loved this state. He loved this country. He wanted to see it thrive. He loved his family. He loved his maker. He was just a good person. We need more Paul Gallos in this country, honestly. We'd all be better off. Thank you, Paul, for all you did, man. We got a bunch going on here in the state of Mississippi on the federal level. We've got Elizabeth Burns Thompson, serves as the executive director of the Modern Ag Alliance, coming on today at 10:35. And then Dr. Dan Edney, the state health officer, joins middays at 11:05. Rhino, the Democrats, they're melting down. It's comical to watch. It really is. They don't have any interest in discussing the massive amount of waste, fraud, and abuse that the Doge team has uncovered. Rather, they just want to smear and tar and denounce Elon Musk. It's the end of democracy. It's a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, that's their new phrase du jour.
It's just incredible to watch all of that. Again, totally misguided. And what I mean by that is you don't seem to be concerned about all of the findings of their efforts. You don't have any interest in addressing that and gaining control of some of this nonsensical money that's going out the door for just dumb purposes. No. You don't care about that. You care about the cushy little gigs, is what it feels to me like, of their buddies. That's the way I see it. Just amazing that they're so misguided. This is how we got here. Honestly, what's going on right now should have been done a long time ago. It's nothing new, for sure. Should have been done a long time ago. The CEO yesterday, the Doge team was up on the Hill testifying. And the CEO of the company LexisNexis, he went up on the Hill as well, and Haywood Talcove is his name, the CEO of LexisNexis Risk Solutions for Governments. He said that for over a decade, a silent war has been waged against American taxpayers. We pay benefits to deceased and incarcerated individuals, direct money to bad actors flagged in the do not pay list, and we just look the other way at all the duplicate Social Security numbers. We don't follow best practices, and there's money going out the door that shouldn't be. He says that he thinks with automation that we could save $1 trillion a year by just having front-end identity verification. Now, he's talking about $1 trillion at the federal, state, and local government levels combined. $1 trillion just by authenticating these recipients of all this taxpayer money going out the door. There's no interest. It's laziness, man. It's laziness in government. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays in the Element Wealth studio. Also, we've been informed, and I'm not sure, Rhino, if it's Eastern time or Central time, but Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of the great state of Mississippi is going to do a tribute on the floor at the U.S. Senate today, 11:30. Again, I'm not sure if it's Central or Eastern time there. But, man, that's quite a nice gesture. They had a good working relationship. He had some very informative interviews with the senator, always good enough to call in or even come in the studio and join Mr. Gallo and bring the news from Washington to the state of Mississippi. That's very much appreciated. He was really good at that. It was funny, Rhino, just to watch Steve Holland yesterday. Of course, he's a character, of course. We've had him on a few times, always fun. But he and Paul, I think it's safe to say, had a special relationship. They like to needle each other, but they were actually quite good friends. And that's one of the points that Steve made. Wouldn't you like to see more of that? Where we can have productive disagreements, shall we say? Respectful disagreements.
Well, that would require one side of the political aisle to quit demonizing the other side as being racist or sexist or misogynist or xenophobic or transphobic or homophobic anytime they disagree.
I think a pastor in Chattanooga, I may even sent you some sound on that a couple of days ago, forgot about that, I think it was Chattanooga, was calling for violence against the president.
And in this nation, I'm worried that we are on the verge of bloodshed. This is an attempt to take us back to a day that we do not want to go, and we will not go. So therefore, there will be conflict. I pray that the peace of God will win out and overcome the madness that is attempting to take over this nation. And I will say to you, beloved, no one likes violence, but sometimes violence is necessary. When Elon Musk forces his way into the United States Treasury and threatens to steal your personal information and your Social Security check, there is the possibility of violence. Sometimes the devil will act so ugly that you have no other choice but to get violent and fight. Well, someone might say, now, Reverend, you shouldn't be talking about violence. This isn't the Christian thing to do. Well, I will say, why not talk this way? Because Jesus did. Jesus said in this key verse, didn't he? The kingdom of heaven suffers what? Violence. And the who? The violent take it by force. The kingdom of God is a war zone. It is a battlefield. You did know this, right?
Oh, that's nice. Great message there, Reverend. Oh, yeah, that's totally consistent, as he indicates farcically, with the teachings of the Lord and the Bible. That's just nice there. They're coming after your Social Security check. Amen. You heard him in there. Amen. Unbelievable. Incredible. So any attempts to root out the stealing of Social Security benefits, Social Security assets, the money you pay into the program by lots of bad actors, and it is pervasive. It's been going on for years because we have lazy people, terrible systems, and no interest, honestly, in stopping that and identifying it and putting a stop to it. That's the fundamental problem. Because it takes, you like to say it all, it takes a little effort. It takes little elbow grease, little gumption, little initiative, little thought.
And sometimes a little risk.
And that's right.
And with that risk means sometimes you don't get your way.
Unbelievable. Leslie in Grenada says Paul and Steve had a love-hate relationship. They loved to get along with each other, but often hated to agree with each other. That's absolutely true, Leslie, and he talked about that yesterday, did Steve. And then I didn't realize that he's got some musical talent as well. They had an electric piano set up there for him, and he played the battle hymn. I thought that was really good, very appropriate, very moving at the time. But we appreciate Steve for coming down and speaking and paying a tribute as he did. And Robert Johnson as well. He, of course, member of the Mississippi House. He's the minority leader of the Democrat Party. He's been on this program many times as well. He, too, had some very thoughtful and respectful and kind words to say about our brother in broadcasting, Mr. Paul Gallo. We really appreciate that. Wow. So, he stopped short, I guess, Rhino, of calling for some sort of violence against the president. I mean, because I listened to it carefully, and I'm thinking to myself, if he says it, let's get the Secret Service down there immediately. Isn't that like against the law? Is that something you could be arrested for? If you threaten violence against the president like that?
It's sticky because you do have the First Amendment right to speak your mind. But yes, if you declare in public that you wish harm upon the president, you will more than likely get a visit from the Secret Service asking you why you said those things, and they will grill you and do a deep dive on you and find all your friends and figure out whether or not it's a serious threat, and it's not going to be a fun time for you.
Okay. Well,
and yes, if you do say the wrong things in those interviews or interrogations, it could wind up being bad for you legally.
There are more examples, as you know, of this, though. There are others in this country that are all bent out of shape. They're all irate just at the fact that the president won. They can't stand his sight, the idea, the notion of him being the president, the commander-in-chief. And they're reacting, no surprise, irrationally, these stupid songs and all that garbage that they're out there singing and having these rallies and jumping up and down. And
Wait. You weren't moved by the rhythm and soul of which side are you on?
Negative. Yeah, I was moved into thinking these are wackos. That's where I was moved. Oh, my gosh. But it's amazing that the CEO of the LexisNexis, a division that deals with government risk solutions, says, yeah, just a little automation and introduction of some modern tools to authenticate applicants for various government grants and benefits, from Social Security to, grants to do all kind of stuff that come from the various agency complex. Just a little authentication to ensure that they legitimately meet the criteria, that they do satisfy the requirements to receive these benefits. Just a little bit there could save you $1 trillion. Now, that's, again, at the state and local level, including in that. But as we have discussed, the CBO came out a couple of years ago and said, yeah, we think it's $237 billion of improper payments, $80 billion of which is in the Medicaid program. Then you got Medicare and Social Security as well, just in those programs. So just addressing that is more than 10% of the deficit. If you could just eliminate that, I think there's a whole lot more to that. And it's because the bad guys know this is easy to go defraud these systems and just sign up and get money. And this is what will really make your blood boil. A lot of that are bad guys overseas. They're getting rich off the American taxpayer. I'm laughing at it because of the absurdity of it, by the way. Not because I find it comical, because it's absurd. And it's disgusting that our government has really never taken an interest in reining this in. And there, you've heard some of the folks complain, this Elon Musk guy, well, he doesn't know anything about education or USAID or Social Security. He's a technology person. Right. The whole point is all of those funds, for the most part, are controlled and processed by technology system. That's where all the data is. All he's doing is using data to mine those gigantic databases to say, wait, this is crazy. We got money going out here, going out there, and look at all this duplication and replication and overlap. Yeah, technology's the way to do that. Something you fools have never thought about using to protect the taxpayers' assets.
I can't wait till he gets into the Pentagon.
Oh, my gosh. Well, and even I think Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has welcomed it, right? He's actually said, come on in, help us out. So using technology and technology people to identify a lot of this wasteful spending and fraud and abuse, no, that's the wise thing to do. That's what the private sector does every single day. But you know what? Their livelihoods depend on it, and that's the fundamental problem. We're stepping aside for a break. We're in the Element Well studio. Elizabeth Burns Thompson with the Modern Ag Alliance is next.
From the day, Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays live from the Element Well studio. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're welcoming now Elizabeth Burns Thompson, serves as the Executive Director of the Modern Ag Alliance. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me today.
You bet. So we've got a bill in the state of Mississippi introduced in the Senate, Senate Bill 2472. It's been extremely controversial, as you well know. I believe this was introduced by Senator Bryce Wiggins. And this bill would grant some form of immunity to the manufacturers of farm chemicals based on the labeling and so-called failure to warn. Commissioner Andy Gibson, Ag Commissioner, has suggested that he supports this legislation, but there's been an outcry from, I guess, the grassroots people in Mississippi that this would just give immunity to those who make these chemicals. They could just do as they see fit and not be responsible for any sort of injury. Tell us your position on this and what you think.
Sure. No, and I appreciate having the opportunity to set straight some of the misconceptions of what this bill does or doesn't do.
Okay.
We found that there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding of what the language would implement. And at the end of the day, what this bill does is says that the label is the law. It recognizes the wealth of research and regulatory oversight that goes into those labels that's done by federal regulators, and ensures that remains consistent from state to state. Manufacturers are beholden to those requirements that come from the federal level, and frankly, this bill makes sure that manufacturers or companies are not being sued for following the law.
Okay, so this is where it got confusing to me when just reading the letter. I've got it in front of me from the commissioner. He says that the manufacturers could still be subject to legal liability if their products cause injury, regardless of what the label says. So what immunity is actually being provided, I guess, by this legislation?
Sure, and we would argue that it's not an immunity, not a liability shield, not of those. And I think the commissioner's letter that you're referencing does lay that out fairly clearly, right? So it basically what we've seen, and to kind of take a step back to where these conversations came from to begin with. I know listeners to your show pay attention to a lot of different kind of political moving pieces, and we've seen kind of politics of other states come in and unfortunately impact our ability to do things or farm, frankly, the way that we need to farm. And specifically, I draw the listeners' attention to Prop 65, which was an initiative out of the state of California that looked at attempting to put unwarranted labels on crop protection tools, like what we're talking about today with this legislation. That was ultimately struck down, but we think that that's been just the start of where you have individuals, interest groups, the trial attorneys looking for ways to be able to undercut or really take tools out of the toolbox of the American farmer.
So maybe I'm oversimplifying this, Elizabeth, but what's the objection on the part of the manufacturers to just simply including some sort of warning as part of the label?
Frankly, I think it undercuts the necessity or the underpinnings of the label itself, right? We don't just randomly put things on labels. The makeup and the component pieces of that label are federally regulated. Everything that is on that label is put so with purpose and has an immense amount of science and justification behind it. You don't put things on label that could, maybe, might, we don't know. Everything on that label has specific justification. So we're following, we as in agriculture holistically is following that label to a T, be it the manufacturers that are producing that product, and then ultimately the farmers or applicators that are following kind of the application designations on that products as well, right? So where it can go, what rates, what crops, and the like, and also handling of that product too.
I guess I'm confused as to why we need a law. What's the purpose of the law? So the manufacturers don't want to put, some simple words on the label that says, hey, this stuff could do some bad and possibly cause whatever, do some sort of harm to people or the environment. They don't want to do that. And this bill, basically, the way I read it, says if they don't do that, but it still causes injury, according to what the commissioner says, you can still sue them. I'm not sure exactly what we need this legislation for. It's confusing.
So the purpose of the legislation is to take away from that confusion, right? Or to ensure that there is clarity from state to state that the federal label is the law. It is as simple as that. And so there is some conversation of, well, if we're talking about federal law, shouldn't this be a federal fix? And there are certainly things that we are talking to members of Congress about, as pathways that as well. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about these lawsuits, those are coming about as state level causes of action too. So that's in part why it's important that these are clarified at the state level. And again, this is a conversation that's obviously taking place in Mississippi. There are a number of state legislators that are having this very similar conversation, reviewing a very similar, if not identical, language. State capitals really almost coast to coast. In the first few weeks of my role here, we've been able to participate in those conversations in North Dakota and Missouri and Iowa, Mississippi, and many places in between. And really roll together. I think it's important that folks understand really the support and the entities and what is really at risk absent this type of legislation moving forward. And I'm from agriculture. Obviously, this is an agricultural conversation when we're talking about these types of tools, and to look at the cross-section of the agricultural community that has come together and supported this bill in the chamber thus far here in Mississippi and in legislatures really all across the country to date. The
perception in the public square is that what this bill attempts to do is just again, provide this immunity and just keep people from suing these big multinational companies, even though they cause some sort of harm through use of their products, that this bill would shield them from that. I mean, that is the perception. I'm not sure the message is getting out to the public to understand, according to your description of it, that's not what it does exactly. And that's what the commissioner said as well in his letter.
I would agree. And I think that's in part why I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show here today. Appreciate the remarks from the Ag Commissioner. We are trying to do as much as we can to try to bring attention to what the language actually does, which is codifies the federal regulatory process on pesticide labels. We are not taking away causes of action for lawsuits that are warranted. What we're working to do is to ensure that there are processes and consistency. Okay.
So we have a federal labeling process, right? We have standards. I guess, are those standards promulgated by the EPA? Are there other agencies involved in that as well?
Correct. So as it relates to ag pesticides, that sits within the United States EPA. And this is not just as simple as, maybe the label that we're used to seeing on the side of name your consumer product. These labels upwards take 12 to 15 years sometimes of the research that goes into the review of individual technologies, that being done by the manufacturers, by the regulatory entity itself, independent researchers as well. So all of those things coming together before a product can even be brought to market. And I think it's also important to note that isn't just a snapshot in time, right? These products are re-reviewed at least every 15 years. And I highlight specifically the at least portion because we know, even just looking back at the history of one of the most, widely used particular chemistries in this space, glyphosate, which I know is on the top of many folks' mind. Yeah. That particular technology has been used safely for 50 years. It's been successfully re-registered a variety of times and reviewed even more so in that 15-year window in each of those buckets. Not just in this country, but I think it's important to note, these types of tools are also being used all around the world and subject to reviews and regulatory oversight in each of those jurisdictions, and to date, has successfully been re-registered.
I got you. Well, we're out of time here today, but I did want to pass this on. I've been working with a company that down in Florida that has created some chemical-free, some all-natural pesticides and herbicides and microbials. It's called Clear Green. Maybe something you guys want to check out. They've been testing it with the state of Florida. Seems like it may be a way to appease everyone and address this problem. But, Elizabeth, really appreciate you joining us today. Very insightful, and we'll keep an eye on this legislation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me today.
You bet. Elizabeth Burns Thompson, Executive Director of the Modern Ag Alliance, has been our guest. Coming right back.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Some news to pass on to you is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been approved. He will be the new Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, a member of the President's Cabinet. So that's a done deal. Kash Patel, the FBI, looks like he may be on deck there, Rhino. So we got, I would argue that the two who were thought to struggle with their confirmations in there, Tulsi Gabbard and now RFK. So Kash Patel, the FBI director, is up next.
Yeah, his nomination just passed the committee with a vote of 12-10.
Yep. So, by the way, we were just informed that the floor speech that Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith will make in honor, in memory, and in recognition of the contributions of our brother in broadcasting, Paul Gallo, will occur, I believe, now at 11 o'clock our time, so in about 5 minutes. Wow. So that was an interesting discussion. Lots of opinion on both sides of this argument with respect to the big chemical manufacturers, agricultural chemical manufacturers. I believe Ms. Burns-Thompson referred to them as crop protection tools. Haven't heard that reference before. That sounds like something maybe that was created in the agricultural industry as a reference to those substances.
It's like you can't say Elvis impersonator. You have to say Elvis tribute artist now.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Just a rebranding.
Stacy in Summit says, I don't trust the government science on herbicide and pesticides any more than I trust their vaccine science. I hear you. And that's a legitimate concern. There's no doubt about it. This is more about labeling. I'm still scratching my head as to why you would oppose just adding a little bit more to the label. And I admit, I've learned a little bit about the labeling standards and the arduous task, as she talked about, sometimes years of getting a label. I didn't know that, honestly, until I started working with these guys in Florida that had these all-natural products.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, one of the first things they informed me of was we've already got label and label approvals, which is a big deal when you're trying to raise money, of course, and that's what I'm helping them do. And also just introducing them to state leaders. These are products that could be used alternatively to the chemical-based products, herbicides, pesticides, microbials, fertilizers, soil amendments, and so forth, the series of products that farmers use. And they maintain in testing, most of which has been done in the state of Florida, that yields are improved, and so is the effectiveness in treating certain really aggressive, invasive, and stubborn plants, such as, I think I'm saying this right, something I never heard of before, Coogan grass, I believe it's what it's called, but I did introduce them to Commissioner Andy Gibson. We conducted a Zoom call. This was back between Christmas and New Year's. The commissioner was kind enough to schedule that call. I believe he was actually on vacation, but he was good enough to attend a 30, 45-minute introduction. And when they started talking about their tests in Florida on this, I think it's Coogan grass, if I'm not.
Yeah, it's invasive species that really has problems when it mixes with wildfire because the grass has flammable oils.
Oh, wow.
And it can even be attributed to reducing the survival of pine trees that would normally survive a wildfire because it increases the severity and the intensity of a fire, including prescribed burns.
Well, I can share this. Commissioner Gibson, when he heard them talk about that and the tests they had done in Florida, which yielded very positive results, apparently this is a big problem and a costly problem, and it's extremely difficult to eradicate. And it's a big problem in Florida, and it's a big problem in the state of Mississippi. And when they started talking about that, I'm telling you guys, the commissioner, he perked up. Wow, you got something that can help us? It's something I never even heard of until that day. I mean, I don't track that. All I'm saying is these guys may be on it.
A lot of folks saying it's Kogon.
Okay, I apologize. I apologize for that. So, pronounced like photon. So, again, I acknowledge this is an area I don't know a great deal about. But I do know a lot about raising money, and that's what I'm trying to help them do. And again, just trying to make connections into people that can investigate and explore these products and these tools and see if they make sense here in the state of Mississippi. But certainly, there's a big movement, as you know, now with RFK being confirmed to try to improve the health of our nation, but in particular our food supply. It's Fox News and SuperTalk News next. Then Dr. Dan Edney, the state health officer.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher. And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year, oh Lord. I hope she holds on a little.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. The afternoon portion of the program is now live. Oh, we're not in the afternoon, excuse me. We're in the second hour, is now live on this
Friday Eve.
Just wanted to pass on again that I believe at this hour, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith is on the floor of the United States Senate paying tribute to our brother in broadcasting, Paul Gallo, at this moment. So really great that he's getting national exposure. Man, I know he's smiling down from heaven at that event going on in the United States Capitol on the Senate floor there. But right now, it's Dr. Dan Edney. He's the state health officer for the great state of Mississippi. Dr. Edney, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Gerard. Always happy to be with you.
Yes, sir. So I've seen you a few times this busy session down at the Capitol.
Yes.
You just told me that some of your bills are going to the floor today, right?
They're in the well right now on the House side.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us about those bills. What are you working on?
Well, the main things we're working on, we're trying to just improve our financial sustainability through things that we do internally to try not to be as much of a strain on the state general fund. And so we have some bills that adjust some fees, that open up some special funds that we can pivot to more high priority use that right now are hard to spend. One was just the procurement process for state public health lab, which is very specialized. It's the highest level lab in the state, bio level 3.5, almost as high as you can get. Procurement process that is what it is, costs about $500,000 more just overhead than necessary, and just getting some relief in things that will reduce the overhead of the Department of Health. So, this year my budget request was very modest, basically level funding for the agency, which you and I know means a cut. Because we're not even asking for inflationary costs, because there are things that we can do ourselves to try to save the taxpayers' money. So a lot of that. I am asking for a trust for public health, an endowment established as a state special fund, so that I can seek private sector funding that would go into the endowment, and that could sustainably fund public health in the future without having to use state taxpayer money. Just trying to think outside the box, coming from the private sector, of things that would work to fund public health. I am concerned because at the federal level, it's very clear that there are going to be significant cuts, and just trying to position there, because 70% of our funding is federal funding. So if the CDC takes a 20% cut, then that flows out to us and will be a substantial impact to us. But I also understand the federal budget needs to be reined in.
Yeah.
There are things that need to change, but still impacts my reality.
You read my mind. That's what I was about to ask you, is whether or not the department receives any federal funding, and just the impact of this movement, shall we say, in Washington to cut spending really across the board.
Right.
And a lot of that does flow down to the states that supports various programs and initiatives, and especially in health.
Yeah, it's important to know the CDC's budget, 80% of congressional funding to the CDC flows out to state departments of health.
Okay.
So when you hit them, you hit us. But also, we all know the federal budget has to be brought under control somehow, and we're happy to do our part, but still got to run those county health departments, got to keep the water clean, got to keep the hospitals safe, got to make sure the food in the restaurants are safe, and that we can attack outbreaks as they occur, which they happen every week. We have an outbreak of something every week that the Department of Health has to get our arms around and contain. And, our mission is to protect and advance the health, well-being, and safety of everyone in Mississippi. So we are one of the state agencies, one of the few that actually touches every life every day. I'm proud to say we have already protected your family today, Gerard, and we have protected the families of everyone listening today by keeping the water clean and the prepared food safe and nursing homes safe, and just all the way across the board, all of our regulatory action and our public health programs that promote the health of the state.
Well, that's an important point, because the state health department does have some responsibility by statute, right, with respect to our water supply.
We do. That is specifically, we have statutory obligation to test the water to make sure that water production facilities around the state are in compliance with the Safe Water Drinking Act.
Okay. I mean, that's how we ended up with the issues in Jackson, correct?
It was actually intervention of the Department of Health to alert the governor and everyone else that we have a problem.
And then I believe the governor, was able to exercise some statutory authority, right, to take control of the water system.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the federal government, as you know, the another program that is in the crosshairs is the Medicaid program. And there's talks on the Hill, Kaiser Family Foundation, which is, I find, to be really a foremost authority on healthcare policy, certainly at the federal level. They published an article today. The Hill published one yesterday, and it's really digging into what the House and the Senate are thinking about as they just do a thorough examination of all government spending and where some cuts could be made. And Medicaid is one that seems to be in the crosshairs. Maybe even talking about converting the system to a block grant funding model.
Right.
Perhaps if that doesn't occur, reducing the federal match, which would be a big blow to our state budget.
It would. It would be a huge blow to the state budget, and because we have the most favorable match,
right,
in the
about
country.
78% last I checked. Yeah.
So it's put up $1, draw down $4. That's a good deal, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
And healthcare infrastructure in the state depends on that, and it does benefit those of us with private insurance, because the amount of Medicaid and Medicare dollars in the healthcare system help to fund the healthcare system, so that our private funding is not so important. And Medicaid funding is important to us because we provide services all over the state in our county health departments, and we bill Medicaid, for those services.
Okay.
And that we actually generate more internally at the Department of Health than our state appropriation. So it's
right.
It was important that we do that. Every dollar we're able to generate is one less tax dollar that from Mississippi that has to come to us.
Okay.
So that's really important to me as a conservative business person coming from the private sector. Is there are principles that do apply. There are a lot that won't because of state law, but just simple overhead control, increased revenue generation. We've been working hard for the last 3 years since I've been state health officer to do a better job with that, and we're being successful. And when I took office, we were 80% dependent on federal funds. We're now down to 70%.
Okay.
And that's because we're generating more ourselves, and also the state has been a little bit more generous the last 2 years with us. But I think when we look at things like Medicaid, we need to be surgical and not just use a sledgehammer. There are savings across the board with the federal budget, but I think if you're strategic and surgical, you can save a lot of money without hurting the program or hurting the people.
Yeah. Well, and there's some other policy matters as well, and if you can hang around, we're about up on a break here, and we could talk about that. But right now, I know that I've always respected you because your passion is not so much, I think, healthcare policy, but health.
Right.
And
the health of the people.
Right. And you talk about that a lot, and you inform our lawmakers a lot about that, and other organizations and individuals as well. How are we doing these days?
A little bit better. I'm really proud that for the first time in a long time, we have moved off the bottom from 50th to 49th. And we were more like 54th to 49th.
Okay.
With our America Health rankings.
Yep.
And that comes from doing a little bit better with infant mortality, a good bit better with maternal mortality, life expectancy increasing by about half a year,
Okay.
all-cause mortality easing back down, again, coming out of the pandemic. We're doing a little bit better with heart disease, cancer, and accidents. Doing a lot better with opioids, HIV, TB. Still have opportunity, but I'm finally seeing that needle move a little bit at the population level to where today I do believe there are more Mississippians who will live this year that 5 years would have died this year. So I'm quite pleased. We still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But starting to see some improvement.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear that there's some improvement there. On the other side of the break, I'd like to get your thoughts on some of the other legislation.
Sure.
The nurse practitioner, for example, the bills there that would maybe expand that a bit, and then the certificate of need changes as well.
Yeah.
That have been talked about. We got Dr. Dan Edney. He's the state health officer for Mississippi. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so awesome.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. Dr. Dan Edney, the state health officer, is our guest. So, good news on the health front.
Yes.
I know that's something that you track and you're passionate about, and you feel like is your primary responsibility. I don't think I'm misstating that whatsoever.
It's actually a statutory responsibility given to the state health officer.
Okay.
It's a whole lot more, Gerard, than just running the State Department of Health. That's just one hat I wear.
Yeah.
But as state health officer, I mean, the statute is clear that I am to pay particular attention in reducing the disparities that are causing poor outcomes for maternal infant health. That's like number one in statute: diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. When we have programs going after all of that. We're currently rolling out now the obstetrical system of care for high risk perinatal for moms and and neonates that are being born, especially in rural areas that don't have right now the support they need, and we're having to move them in a very high-risk way, having a system of care modeled after trauma, that the system moves the mama and moves the baby quickly to get them to the right level of care during that golden period of labor and delivery when bad things happen quickly. So that's just one of many avenues that we're attacking maternal infant death and seeing improvement. And I get tired of the doom and gloom picture for health in Mississippi. Our doctors are as good as anybody's. Our hospitals are statistically proven to be as good as anyone's. It's just the health of our population is not, and that's multifactorial. Yeah. Access to care being a big part of it, which is really complicated.
Sure,
it's not just one thing that causes access to care issues, but there are public health programs that are validated to show that we can improve our outcomes, and they're starting to bear fruit, and I'm really excited about that.
Okay, and you and I've talked about this before, but much of the issues and the medical problems during the gestation, the prenatal period, a lot of that's preventable, is it not, that we're experiencing here in Mississippi?
Over 80%. When we look at maternal and infant death, we're looking at maternal death for sure. More than 80% of those deaths are preventable. When you take out genetic malformations with newborns, the rest of those deaths are almost totally preventable.
Wow.
Almost 100% preventable. And prenatal care is everything.
Is education a part of this as well, Dr. Edney?
Absolutely. You'll be, and if you pay attention, you'll see us rolling out campaigns periodically that's really raising awareness and pushing out simple principles. Infant death, there are 3 principles that will save so many babies. Just not co-sleeping with infants, putting babies with the back to sleep principle of laying them down to sleep on their backs. That saves lives.
Wow.
Just very simple things that people don't know unless you teach them.
Wow. So we got some work to do there, but the good news is that's a pretty simple solution in that we just got to get the word out and get people to, I guess, consume this education.
And primary prevention is the way to go. That's getting way upstream. It's the most cost-effective thing we can do when you educate people on simple behavior changes that make a huge impact. So with infant death, a lot of it is primary prevention. Moms, especially our Medicaid moms, seeking prenatal care early. Yeah. And then, with those babies, you bring them home, back to sleep, no co-sleeping. I know it's hard when they're screaming all night, but we lose babies every year.
I'll be darned.
Being strangled and the bedclothes.
Dang.
Mama waking up the next day with the baby dead in the bed. So these are just things we have to change so that we have more babies getting to celebrate their 1-year birthday. And that's if we can get them to age 1, then we have a much better chance to get them to age 50.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, man, we got to do that.
Public health's important.
I know you know that. Well, I don't want to try to prioritize the economic aspect of this over the human aspect, but there's an economic cost to this as well.
Yes, with maternal infant death, we have had a healthcare economist calculate for us that our current poor outcomes are costing Mississippi about $4 billion a year. And we're only talking about less than 400 deaths.
Wow,
costing us $4 billion a year. And then, when we shared last time, when you loop in heart disease, cancer, and accidents on top of maternal infant death, and we're up to $25 billion a year.
Incredible.
Negative impact to the economy, and some low-hanging economic development right there. Just all of us working together to make the health of the public better.
Legislation that was always controversial, that would extend some additional authority to nurse practitioners, and in particular the CRNAs, right? The nurse anesthetists. I think I said that right.
Yes.
What's the status of that? I can't remember right now.
So thanks a lot, Gerard. Of course, as a physician, I'm biased.
Yeah.
But I believe strongly in the physician-led team.
Okay.
I do with the obstetrical workforce. I believe we can extend the obstetrical workforce much more powerfully by having OBs help to lead teams that include family medicine, OB specialists, and licensed certified nurse midwives working together as a team. We can augment the workforce without training a whole lot more OBs, which we just aren't able to do.
Shortage, right?
Oh, absolutely. And half the OBs we train in the state leave the state.
I've heard the same thing.
So I'm real proud that in Meridian they have the OB fellowship being added to their family medicine program. That will help. But I've been a doctor in Mississippi for 34 years, and I have depended on APRNs and most recently physician assistants to help me get the job done, because there's no way I could do it by myself. So I value them very highly. Health department employs a lot of nurse practitioners. When I took over, there were 12 for the state. We're now up to over 30. Probably going to need 40 as we expand our clinical services. So I believe in any professional being able to practice their profession at the full extent of their training and experience. And that comes through licensure. I am concerned that we don't need to be dumbing down medical or nursing education by virtual training. It's not the same. We don't allow doctors to do medical school virtually.
Okay.
I believe we don't need to, that mid-level should be doing a lot of virtual training. It needs to be what historically has proven to work. And what you mentioned, if we're going to expand practice authority, then we just need to be careful with it. And I personally believe in a pathway to more broad practice authority that's tightly regulated. Physicians are heavily regulated.
Sure.
And that, we demonstrate a pathway of high-level expert training, experience, no disciplinary action, good quality, and as that's demonstrated over time, then if we choose to expand practice authority, to me I think that's a wise, safe way versus just carte blanche.
Okay.
So just an item for consideration for whatever my opinion is worth. At the Department of Health, we do a really good job valuing the practice authority of our APRNs, and we do it collaboratively, but they are out on the front lines taking great care of our patients, and I trust and value them to an extremely high extent.
So let's talk about, before you go here, the Certificate of Need statutes, which there's some legislation that would at least reform that a little bit, right? That's being considered.
The House bill is fairly significant with its changes. We'll see how the Senate receives it, but eliminating the need for CON for perinatal care and substance abuse and certain psychiatric components, which Board of Health endorsed. And then also for hospitals that are already doing inpatient dialysis, allowing them to do outpatient dialysis if they choose without having to fight through the CON process. Another Board of Health recommendation, that's in the statute. We'll see how the Senate receives it. I think those are all reasonable things that can be done to open up access and healthcare investment in a safe way.
Makes sense. Dr. Dan Edney, the State Health Officer, has been our guest on Middays. Always good to see you, Dan. Thanks for coming
Likewise. Thank you.
We're coming back in the Element Well studio. Stay with us.
From the same.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Back with you in the Element Well studio. It is middays. Let's see, you've got some sound force there, Rhino, from the United States Senate, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith.
Yeah, this isn't live, but it was live. I paused it when it was live, so you'll get to listen to it the same time we do. But this is from the floor of the Senate with Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith giving remarks on the late, great Paul Gallo.
The senator from Mississippi is recognized.
Mr. President, it is a sense of sadness, but also an honor to celebrate the life of someone who truly made a profound impact on my home state of Mississippi, Paul Gallo. My state mourns Paul, who died January the 19th, 2025, after a brave fight with cancer. Known across the airways as the host of the Paul Gallo Show, Paul was far more than just a broadcaster. If there's anyone who can be considered a Mississippi icon, it's him. He earned that status over decades as a steady voice for news and opinion in my state. I'll never forget the first time I had the honor of being on the Paul Gallo Show as a newly elected state senator. Paul treated me with kindness, fairness, and respect. Qualities he extended to everyone he encountered, whether they were politicians, movers and shakers, or simply everyday listeners. He made you feel like you were a part of every conversation, someone you could rely on, and someone you could trust. In the 1990s, Paul helped transform a long-time vision into reality with the creation of SuperTalk Mississippi, a statewide network that gave Mississippians a platform to be heard, uniting our state through shared conversation. Paul was the son of the Mississippi Delta, was a true believer in Mississippi. He recognized its potential and its strengths, but he wasn't afraid to address its challenges head on. He shaped the conversations that mattered to the people of Mississippi, no matter where they lived across the state. Throughout his career, Paul was a voice for change. He spoke out on critical issues affecting our communities and held our leaders accountable. His dedication to the people of Mississippi and his unabashed commitment to doing right by them was evident in everything he did. Beyond his broadcasting career, Paul and his colleagues at SuperTalk Mississippi became champions for the Palmer Home for Children. Their tireless efforts raised millions of dollars to support children in need, giving them a better chance at a brighter future. Paul's compassion for the people of Mississippi, especially its children, was unwavering. My heart goes out to his wife, Patsy, their children, grandchildren, the entire SuperTalk family, and the countless listeners whose lives he touched. Paul's impact on Mississippi will be felt for generations through the stories he shared, the people he connected with, the policies he's influenced, and the legacy he leaves behind. Paul Gallo will always be part of Mississippi's story and always a part of our hearts. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
That was outstanding. Very accurate, very fitting, very appropriate. Also, I apologize, Rhino, when I was sharing those who delivered remarks yesterday in the celebration of Mr. Gallo's life. I failed to mention Drake Bassett, CEO of Palmer Home. SuperTalk and Palmer Home, of course, are joined at the hip. And he was extremely complimentary, of course, and grateful to Paul, to SuperTalk, for the efforts of this network, and certainly Mr. Gallo in particular, in raising a whole bunch of money for a lot of kids that really need it. And, of course, you and I enjoy going up there every year for the Radiothon, and I can assure you this year we're going to exceed last year's tally. That is our goal. What a great cause, and you've been there, I've been there. You can't appreciate it until you witness these children and the families and the staff. It's a beacon of light and hope in what are often very difficult, challenging circumstances. Yesterday, Drake mentioned that when he was just talking about the Palmer Home and its work and how children would appear before them that they would take in that would be wearing just bare bones gym clothes, short sleeves and shorts in frigid weather, 20-degree weather. And that just hurts your heart thinking about that. And so Mr. Gallo was a huge part of the success of the Radiothon and this network in helping its marquee cause, its marquee philanthropy. And I'm certainly proud and honored to be part of it. But we could never repay Mr. Gallo for his tireless efforts in also helping to raise funding and provide the resources these children need to get them on track. We all benefit from it. That's the point. It's not just them. Society benefits. Our state benefits. Our communities benefit when we get these children into a scenario, a situation where they can thrive and reach their fullest potential. And that's what it's all about. Thank you, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, for your remarks there in the well on the floor of the United States Senate. I know Paul he's up in heaven right now smiling down on that. He may have thought at some point about how many lives he touched, how much influence he had, and how much he was involved in shaping the landscape of Mississippi and Mississippi politics in particular, and as the senator said, holding those lawmakers accountable and elected officials. He was a master of that for sure. He will be missed. The great Paul Gallo. All right, so we're back again in the Element Well studio. Lots of texts rolling in, lots of other news to pass on. I think we shared with you earlier that RFK Jr.'s been approved, confirmed by the United States Senate. We're on our way there. And many listeners have corrected me on my pronunciation of this invasive grass. Kogan grass. I apologized. I called it Coogan, and that's on me. I'm learning about this stuff, but I don't have to be a chemist and an agricultural professional to understand that, hey, if these guys have produced some products that are all natural and they perform equivalent or better than those products which are flush with various chemical agents, seems to me like we ought to take a hard look at that as a substitute. So I think you're going to see more attention and more focus on that with RFK, yet another one of the posse with the new sheriff in town. Oh, my gosh, the liberals are going to melt down again, aren't they? They already are. And you know what? I think they're hurting themselves, honestly. If they think that is endearing themselves to their wacko supporters, because if you just look in the crowd, they seem to be as loony as the people that have the mic, honestly. I don't think they represent mainstream America and the vast majority of Americans, and it feels like the pendulum is swinging back to some degree of normal, away from crazy, as Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of the great state of Arkansas, said. This isn't just about normal. This is just crazy. And she's so right in that. Man, did you see that Worcester, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, because in different settings with that proper name of a city.
Yeah, it could be Worcester, it could be Worcester, it could be Worcester, it could be Worcester.
Right. I'm talking about the one in Massachusetts, I believe. You've seen that?
I think that's Worcester.
Okay. Did you see themselves, see the city leaders, I guess, have declared themselves as a sanctuary city for transgenders? Oh, my God. Am I right on this?
Yeah, and the funniest comment on all of it was a still shot from the board meeting or whatever it was they were having, the meeting of the aldermen or town hall meeting or whatever it was, where you had the trainees talking, and the comment was, for the first time in my life, I'm completely convinced every single person talking showed up in the same car.
That's great. We are taking a break. We got another segment in hour 2 of Middays, and then a whole afternoon hour in store for you. Stay with us.
At Watkins Beach. Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Rumors spreading round in that Texas town about the shack outside the game. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
Welcome back, everyone. ZZ Top. We're back in the Element Well studio. Well, the Democrats should love the Department of Government Efficiency, seems to me like, but they don't. They're outraged. Minority Leader now, Chuck Schumer, says,
Bad guy.
Yeah, isn't he something? Hey, Democrats, if you want to try to reestablish any sort of credibility with the American people, choose another leader. He's terrible. He really is. He's unhinged.
But I mean, look at the other quote-unquote leadership on the Democrat side in the Senate, and
not a good bench over there.
Yeah.
He says Mr. Musk is running a shadow government staffed by a secret squad of company men.
Remember, these are the same people that, about a year ago, even less than a year ago, we're still telling you that, you just haven't seen Joe Biden behind closed doors.
Right.
He's running circles around the interns. He's doing cartwheels while solving calculus. We can barely keep up with him.
Right.
That's the same person accusing Elon of running a shadow government.
Yeah.
That propped up a puppet in Joe Biden for a 4-year term.
Well, it's really thanks to Doge, the Democrats and progressives ought to be elated because I think you're looking at an era where government is going to shrink somewhat. You've seen 75,000, I think, government employees have signed on to the early retirement proposal.
Which means by the time all their paperwork is done, it'll be about 2072.
That's true, especially now that we've learned about this group.
Was it Iron Mountain?
In Iron Mountain. They used to be one of my customers years ago.
Limited by the speed of the elevator.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is like a whole city underground in the limestone encased mountain. It was originally, Rhino, those things were built decades ago to store paper records. it was paper storage, record storage. That's how they started. In banks, medical operations, and so forth, that didn't have enough room to keep all that paperwork, but needed to. And that's the only way that it was recorded was on paper. So they'd move all their files. They'd come by and pick it up and store it. And if you needed to retrieve it, you could request it, and they'd bring it to you. But it was stored in those underground facilities, hardened facilities, for protection. Well, as we became a more digital society, now those underground sort of naturally protected areas, like in Pennsylvania, where you've got naturally occurring limestone, which is incredibly strong and provides a very effective physical barrier. Then we kind of transitioned, by the way, before we started putting data centers in those things. We started putting your backup data, your backup media, analog media, tapes and so forth. And that was a place to put your backup instead of putting it on the shelf where, my primary system just burned down. By the way, it took the backup with it. And then you always have...
I mean, it's kind of smart from the standpoint of you could build a giant warehouse to do the same thing, but then you got to pay the overhead of climate controlling the warehouse, whereas if you go far enough underground, the climate is pretty much constant.
That's true. But what we've learned here, because the Doge boys found out about it, is there's a whole city of bureaucrats down there that are processing various types of government transactions in paper form. Right? I don't think I'm misdescribing this.
Yeah, he was talking about it when he was in the Oval Office with Trump, and Elon was saying that I think the limit is 10,000 employees can be retired a month.
Unbelievable. But discovering this, it's almost like a relic of the past. It is a relic of the past. I mean, the processing, the workflow, and the various tasks that must be performed by these employees in the Iron Mountain underground limestone encased facility in Pennsylvania, which has its own police and fire department, I believe, down there. And what they found is just a bunch of paper being pushed around. And 2025, all being paid by your tax dollars. And actually tracked the progress of some of that paperwork through the various stations and tasks. It's incredible how slow it is.
If you do the math, on average, the average employee does 2 a day.
Unbelievable.
That's government efficiency for you.
That's just hard to believe that's going on. Well, we're taking a break right now. Fox News, SuperTalk News coming your way. We've got another hour of talk from the Element Well studio. Stay with us.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. The president said, on this
Friday Eve.
I got to get that in. The president says the Department of Education is, quote, a con job. So, he was thinking about ending it via executive order, and I think maybe that's perhaps a little suspect, whether or not he can do that. And again, this gets into all kinds of legal debate. That's why we had law professor Christopher Green on with us yesterday, who did a great job, as he always does, of breaking down. But what you learn anytime you talk to the professor is that it's the nature of our laws. Well, you could argue this, but on the other hand, you could argue that. And he's right in pointing that out. Nothing is quite as evident, I guess, in just black and white and empirical as it may seem. And certainly when you're talking about executive branch power. That's been called into question quite a bit over the last few presidential cycles because it's been used so regularly in the form of issuing executive orders. And, of course, as long as the president, whomever that president may be, is writing those orders to do things you like, you're in full support of it. But the minute they put the pen to paper of something you oppose, oh, no, they can't do that. That's unconstitutional. And that's kind of what's happening now. But the latest I saw, Rhino, is that the president is encouraging the Congress to act rather than just an executive order that would temporarily, and I say temporarily because if the president could abolish such a department, a Democrat president in the future, for example, could recreate it. So I think it is wise on the part of the president to implore the Congress, hey, you guys pass some legislation here that would end the Department of Education. Of course, they're protesting the president's pick for Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, because she is very much a pro-choice secretary candidate there. Or has she been confirmed yet? I'm having a hard time keeping up.
No, her hearing was earlier today, I believe.
Okay, that's right. So she's not been confirmed yet. She is presently we would refer to her as the nominee, the selection. But she is a pro-choice nominee, and the president is as well. However, right here in the great state of Mississippi, we can't seem to get school choice over the old finish line. These policies, once again, are facing hurdles, lots of opposition. Yesterday, Representative Rob Robertson, he chairs, of course, the Education Committee in the Mississippi House. He made the statement that he doesn't see the votes necessary to pass legislation that would allow a student stuck in a poorly performing school or district to transfer to a private school if there's not a better public school within 30 miles of their residence. And the money appropriated to said student from the state funding per pupil, $6,900 per year, would follow that student to their private school of choice, provided the private school does allow them in, does accept their application and admit them for enrollment. That's the way that program would work. And it was pushed back upon even in the House, even though the Speaker of the House supports this legislation. And so it looks like it's on life support at best right now. We do have a bill that would allow public-to-public transfer. That's House Bill 1435, introduced by Representative Jansen Owen. That is being transmitted to the Senate. How are we transmitting bills now down the hall, Rhino?
Well, you've got the Zydeco band leading the parade, and then you have the T-Rex wearing the tuxedo and the top hat with a monocle, carrying the gold mace, while the marching band behind him wears the inflatable T-Rex costumes while rolling around on roller skates.
I got you. Well, I can't wait to see that when I head down there. I think that is the appropriate way to transmit legislation down the hall there. Oh, man. But 1435 headed down to the Senate, and that's just a very simple, I would call that like entry-level, bare bones, minimum school choice. Once again, this is legislation that would allow a student to transfer to, this would be from any school to any school, and that the transferee school board would not be able to approve or would be able to approve or refuse, but the transferor. So in other words, the homeschool district could stand in the way. That's the bottom line. I'm reading the legal language here out of the bill, but the homeschool district or the homeschool and the district board that governs the schools within the district couldn't prohibit, couldn't block, couldn't preclude the student from transferring to another school. The receiving school would have the ability to approve or refuse, but they couldn't do so based on the student's ability or disability, for example. And they would also be able to restrict based on their capacity. And they would have to publish their capacity and submit that to the Department of Education on an annual basis. So it would be known how much room do you have, if any, to accept transferring students in a public-to-public transfer. Now, similar legislation was introduced in the Senate. I have determined that the lieutenant governor does support this, wanted that bill out of committee, but committee chairman, Senator Dennis DeBar, couldn't get it through. Says it just couldn't make it happen. Didn't have the votes in his committee to get it out to the Senate floor. So, based on that, Rhino, I'd say that it's 50-50. This legislation gets through the Senate and gets to the governor's desk, and that may be about it. There is another bill that would allow, I think it's 1432 in the House, that would allow charter schools to operate not only in D or F districts, or to establish in D or F districts, not operate new charter schools, to be located in the current, based on the current grading of districts D or F. This bill would expand that to include districts that graded D or F within the past 5 years. So that would expand it a bit and would kind of account for what I believe is a bit of grade inflation at the district level. So we'll see if that makes it through down there in the Senate. 1435 again on its way. We may end up drilling a dry hole again on some enhancement to the school choice programs in the state, which right now are very limited. Those with dyslexia, special needs, and then establishment of charter schools in D or F districts. That's really about all we have right now. So we'll see what happens. We are being surrounded by states who have been implementing, enacting sweeping school choice legislation. Tennessee and Alabama, the most recent. Arkansas did a couple of years ago, phased that into full universal school choice. We're getting left behind. The president is a proponent of school choice. He said yesterday, I believe, he'd like to see every state enact robust school choice options. Again, he selected a Secretary of Education in Linda McMahon, who I believe will be confirmed. Now, you know she's going to get beat up by the Democrats who don't want any way, shape, or form, any substance of school choice. They want total control of education dollars. And in fact, you can take it further than that, Rhino. They believe that they, not families and parents, should raise children, that children are part of the community. Isn't that what they say? It sounds so virtuous. They're part of the community. No, what they want to do is indoctrinate your dang kids into being good little obedient Marxists is what they want. There's no question about that. And so those who are standing in the way of education choice in this state, in my view, are aligning with Democrats across this country that also oppose it. I'm for freedom. You know, right here in the state of Mississippi, we're all conservative and we're all about free markets, except when it comes to education, health care, alcohol, vehicle sales, sports betting. Did I miss anything? We're all about free markets except for that. Come on, guys. Get with it. Make Mississippi more free. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
For all your
covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert, Middays with Gerard, SuperTalk Mississippi.
sunlight hurts my eye.
So a lot of folks on our C Spire text line, I know we have a lot of people that are in the agricultural industry. They're familiar with this Kogon grass. Did I pronounce it right? I think so, huh? Okay. Again, it's something I wasn't aware of, but like I said earlier, Commissioner Gibson, of course, in his position, would be well aware of, and it's a huge problem for our farmers. It's a costly problem, and it's very difficult to eradicate. Somebody said it would actually grow through plywood. It's that strong. And when my buddies that have created these products, you can look them up, by the way. It's Clear Green. It's what it's called. And they've been testing it in the various products that they make in Florida with the Extension Service there and in Oklahoma. I'm just trying to help them get connected to the right people here in Mississippi for testing and for consideration. And that's where I learned, Rhino, about this label thing. I didn't know how big a deal that was, but that's like your holy grail if you're going to make chemical-type products, right, for agricultural use. In particular, is getting the old label approved. And when they made that point as part of that discussion with the commissioner, that too was received well by the commissioner to know that, okay, well, these things are ready for prime time, good to use right now. They maintain, and this is understandable, that the big traditional legacy chemical companies do everything they can to suppress the distribution of their products. The retailers that would sell these products, they sort of, I don't want to say they get threatened, although I did just say that, but let's just say that the chemical companies whose products they distribute make it very difficult for them to think about introducing competitive products into their inventory and into those which they retail. And that's not surprising. They've got a strong grip on the distribution channel, and they're going to leverage that power. That's just business. That's fine. But when these guys called me, it intrigued me, honestly. I'm not an expert on this, as you can tell, but I can understand the basics, the highest level, and again, I can certainly connect them with the right people and help them find folks that might have an interest in providing capital so that they could continue to grow the company and to establish robust manufacturing and distribution operations. I think with RFK getting confirmed, I just believe there's a huge opportunity here that he's going to take on as a prime objective of serving as the head of HHS, really looking hard at all these various products we're applying to our food supply, and including in the making of the various foods we consume. He's highlighted that for some time, certainly highlighted it again during his Senate hearing. These products seem to me to suit that goal and to help facilitate those goals. Let's see. Ask them to work on something to kill bamboo permanently, says Amanda from Pike County. I will. I'll pass that on. Japanese bloodgrass is another name, says Jim in the Delta, for this Kogon grass. Well, thanks. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's apparently a bunch of different names for it, including spear grass, bladey grass, kunai grass, sword grass, thatch grass, alang-alang, lalang grass, cottonwool grass, kurakura, Kerry, and others.
Okay.
And according to this is from 2003, so it's a little dated, but it's a survey done by the University of Florida.
Yeah.
That Kogon grass has taken over more acreage in the southeastern United States than kudzu.
Unbelievable. So this is a problem. That's a big old problem. Now, somebody said here on the C Spire text line, there's no emphasis on the G. Huh, okay.
Kogon grass.
Did you hear that, by the way? I'll play that. That was, I just looked up the pronunciation.
Kogon grass.
Okay. Kogan is the way they pronounce it here in this pronunciation little helper.
Which goes back to the pronunciation helper we got on the text line that said pronounce it like proton.
Right. Exactly.
Kogan.
Kogan. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah. This was Dave from Ripley asking about the bill introduced that would have deemed contraception begins at erection. Remember that? Introduced by Bradford Blackman. Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of that was. I'll refrain from any attempt to speculate what that was all about. You may have some thoughts.
My thoughts were just on the actual legislator being the embodiment of nepotism.
That's absolutely true. We can go ahead and say that. The problem with what is on the market now, says Kenny in Wayne County, for this grass is it kills the hardwood trees also, even giant oak trees. Okay. Well, maybe these guys are on to something, but you just looked it up in Florida. So that, I think, is why they focused on testing it with the Florida Extension Service. And what they've reported to me is that they've been extremely pleased with all the results of all the products. That's really kind of the message about that. So we're going to keep on working on that, state of Mississippi.
It's a pretty far-reaching problem outside the U.S. as well, so it would behoove a company looking to figure out a solution, because it's not just a problem in the U.S. There's apparently so many problems with it that it is involved in colloquialisms around the world.
Wow.
Like, for example, in the Philippines, a figure of speech for quitters is Ningas Kugan, talking about the Kogan grass.
Yeah.
And it's basically making fun of people that get really excited about something and then quit all of a sudden. And they base it on the fact that if this grass catches fire, it's going to go up really quick and burn really intensely and then go out.
Huh. Well, we've certainly learned something. Who would have thought we'd be sitting here talking about this grass species, but evidently it's a big problem. And if something could mitigate it, and it would save money and increase yields and save land, keep hardwoods from dying, all the other benefits, man, I'm for it, is what I would say. The House and Senate just wanted to pass this on up there in Washington. Something that we've certainly talked about quite a bit is getting busy on extending the Trump tax cuts and hammering out a budget because we're running out of money again. I know you're shocked at that. I think the middle of March or so, about a month from now, is when we got to go back and extend the debt ceiling so we can borrow more money to keep the government afloat. The House is working on one big, beautiful bill, so you know, and the Senate over there says, no, we're going to work on energy and immigration first, and then we'll take up the tax cuts later. Senator Lindsey Graham seems to be involved in leading that charge, as well as Senator John Thune, the majority leader. I disagree with the two bills. I think that is going to be a problem. But they're basically defying Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who says we need one big, beautiful bill. We're ready to get that going over here in the House. But the Senate is moving forward with their own plan, two bills. I'm going to say again, I'm concerned about all of this politics getting involved in the sausage making, and we running out of time to get the Trump tax cuts extended and trying to do too much. So you'll know, just as expected, the plan coming out of the Senate would increase military spending by $150 billion. Border security, including additional detention beds, et cetera, would increase by $175 billion. That's over 10 years, both of these figures. And remember, anytime you hear a reference to budgetary figures from the federal government, always keep in mind 10 years. Nothing specific about the spending cuts, but he does anticipate legislation that would increase annual spending by $85.5 billion, but would be fully paid for through new revenues from domestic drilling. Man, that sounds kind of shaky to me, but that's what's happening in the Senate. That's completely different, markedly different from the House approach. They're toiling on that right now. And while you got some conservative hardliners that are, I guess, to some extent objecting to what that bill is going to look like, it is expected to have some major spending cuts in it. And some of the top Democrats have worked pretty vigorously to include those in the bill. We'll come back on the other side of the break and tell you kind of what the House Budget Committee's got. Also, a little bit more on the tax cut plan, the tax reform plan introduced by the Mississippi Senate yesterday. We're in the Element Well studio. We got a half hour left.
From the Seabrook, bring it on! Middays with Gerard Gibert. It is on SuperTalk Mississippi.
So the Associated Press is no longer allowed to participate in press briefings at the White House because they refuse to relabel the Gulf to the Gulf of America. Oh, geez. Meanwhile, talking about these budget plans, the House plan is an interesting one. It would provide up to $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. We're talking about the U.S. House. A $4 trillion increase in the debt limit. You hear me? $4 trillion increase in the debt limit. That's expected to cover, a couple of years. A couple of years. Because we're going to see $2 trillion deficits every year, indefinitely. It directs a number of the House committees to cut spending by at least $1.5 trillion. That's over 10 years, guys. Keep that in mind. 10 years. Our budget is $2 trillion per year. So this thing cuts spending by less than 10% of the annual deficit. The goal, of course, was to reduce spending by $2 trillion over 10 years. They had to pare that down to 1.5, and recently Elon Musk says, I think one's all we can find. So this is the blueprint coming out of the House. Now, we are optimistic we're going to be able to get Representative Jason Smith on the program next week. He, the Republican from the great state of Missouri, and he heads the House Ways and Means Committee. He's heading up the efforts on the House side to craft a budget bill. We would be very fortunate to get him on the program, and we can thank Congressman Michael Guest, his colleague in the House there, for helping us orchestrate that. We look forward to that. And I'm not being critical and condemning as much as I am just pointing out the reality of how hard this is and how complicated this is, even within the Republican Party, where you have a balance of power in the House that only allows you to lose one vote to pass anything. I think it's where it stands right now. So, oh man, this is not at all surprising. The Energy and Commerce Committee, which handles health care spending, is expected to cut $880 billion over the next decade. Just to keep you abreast there, that committee also, from a budgetary perspective, handles Medicaid, which is where I think we're going to see some significant cuts that are going to have an impact on the budget here in the state of Mississippi, which have to be contemplated in any discussions of tax reform and just crafting of the state's budget. Again, I expect to see the division of Medicaid here in the state, as is the case in all the other states, come forward with a request for additional funding just to meet their obligations to receive a big chunk of federal funding. That's true in every state. One of the things that's being tossed around to cut spending at the federal level is to reduce the highest match in the country from the federal government to operate the state's Medicaid plan. And that could be a significant blow to the budget here in the state of Mississippi. But it is a way to really do something meaningful in Washington to start reining in the deficit spending. $4 trillion debt limit so we can still pay the bills and they don't have to keep that up anymore. And the president supports that, by the way. But that's how the sausage is made over in the House. One big, beautiful bill that would include funding for energy and immigration security, border security, as well as addressing the tax cuts, extension of the Trump tax cuts, and, of course, perhaps some additional tax cuts as well. Although Representative Jason Smith, again, who runs that committee, the Ways and Means Committee, he did indicate he didn't think it was going to be possible to include the president's wish list in any legislation, which would include ending taxation on tips and Social Security and overtime. He indicated he didn't think that was going to make it into the bill just because the math doesn't work. So we'll see where that goes. Of course, right here at home, we got a brand new Senate bill to implement tax reform, and we're going to see how that works out. You heard on the show, you heard on the news break, Senator Josh Harkins, who was on with Richard Cross this morning, talking about the tax bill out of the Senate. It was introduced, announced yesterday, and he said he hopes the two sides can get together to work something out. It does stop short of full elimination. But it would decrease the income tax to 2.99% in 0.25% increments over 4 years beginning in 2027. So it would phase it down to 2.99% from 4%. That's the rate we'll have in effect in 2024. Our news department did a good job of breaking down that bill. You can find an article about the Senate tax bill at supertalk.fm. And, of course, another reminder, if you want a full analysis of HB1, the House's bill, you can find that as well. That's something I published, and the news guys were good enough to put it on our website last week. So it's interesting watching the House and the Senate in Washington work on all this stuff. And, you know, the Senate, again, or the House Ways and Means Committee chairman, he previously said that a $4.5 trillion maximum allowed for tax cuts would be enough to accomplish all the tax priorities. On Wednesday, he said it's a good starting point, but again, less optimistic that that's going to be possible to include those provisions in any such legislation. We shall see. Can our state legislature tackle and get something major done? Nothing on PERS, ballot initiative, school choice, etc. What are they doing up there? And this is another situation where it just depends on where you stand on those issues. There are some people that would say do nothing, that they don't want school choice. There's a lot of people, unfortunately, that oppose it. If you really want to move, in my opinion, if you really want to make progress on implementing robust school choice in this state, I'll make a recommendation to you guys, everybody out there listening. Call your school district superintendent. Call your superintendents. Call your school board. You'll struggle to find anybody in the state among those two groups that supports any form of school choice. I can assure you of this. They are calling their respective reps and senators, telling them, don't you vote for that. You know that's what's going on.
Sadly, yes.
Call them. That's where they're hearing it from. Express to them your dissatisfaction with their protectionist policies. That's where it's coming from. With respect to PERS, I think you're going to see some legislation. In fact, a bill yesterday passed the Senate that would create a new tier, a Tier 5. Now, that's not in unto itself a solution to the PERS financial headwinds. Yesterday, I had a discussion, this was after the show, on the text line with an individual, I can't find it now, I'd have to dig through the text, about the PERS program, and his assertion was, hey, look, the actuary said that really nothing needs to be done, that it's in good shape. And the unfunded liability, this is something that is misunderstood, and I know that it's largely believed that, hey, that just means if everybody retired today, we wouldn't have enough money to pay the bills. Sorta. It's more nuanced than that. What it really means is that the assets on the balance sheet of the program aren't sufficient to cover all the obligated benefits. So that means everybody in the program, as an active member that is earning their way to vested retirement, and everybody that is currently retired. It is an indicator of the health. It's widely used by actuaries as a very reliable indicator of the health of a defined benefit plan. So I apologize for getting a little confrontational. I felt like I was with this individual. I spent a lot of time after the show yesterday, back and forth. You saw it, Rhino, on the discussion. I apologize
well, it doesn't
for
help
that.
He's hard-headed.
Well, because I would make this point. He's pointing to that latest actuarial report that basically says, hey, everything would be fine. Just keep in mind, those same actuaries that produced the report that you relied on to debate me on this are the ones that said, you guys got a problem here in Mississippi. You need to increase your employer contribution rate, plus you need to send some cash into the fund to make sure that the program can satisfy its obligations. Final segment is next.
Hi, Jay Lake.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Thanks for joining us today. So just talking about the Senate and the House up there in Washington working on a budget plan. Man, the clock is ticking. And I don't like the idea that the Senate says, we'll worry about the tax cuts issue later. You're going to mess up, in my view. You're going to play right into the Democrat hands and get our butts beat in the midterms, and then the whole agenda's put on ice. That's my concern. I'm more on board with the House plan. But, I was always concerned about the promises the president made, just to be perfectly honest with you, on ending the taxation of tips and overtime and Social Security benefits. I'm all for cutting taxes, but I know how difficult it is to make the math work so that you can pass legislation in the Senate with a simple majority under the reconciliation rules. And that's what concerned me. Let's take on those additional tax cuts after we get what's currently law extended. I think that is the prudent approach here. And that's exactly what House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Jason Smith said. He said that the sum of the tax cuts, when you combine and offset those with the spending cuts to make it fit within the reconciliation rules, we're barely there. If we added the other cuts that Mr. Trump would like to implement, that would throw it out of kilt, and it would not meet the reconciliation rules, and thus we'd get nothing. So I think that is the prudent thing to do, and I pray the president is good with that. I think it makes sense to continue to pursue those additional cuts. I'm all for that, but let's get what we got in place. Let's give our businesses clarity and certainty on the tax environment going forward so they can unleash those animal spirits of free market capitalism and make America great again, especially our economy. Let's see. I'm all for rooting out waste and fraud, especially when it comes to my tax dollars, says Shaq Bully in Biloxi. But the concern I have is the business of being the United States government's like a super tanker. You just don't stop it on a dime and change direction. There has to be a process in place, not just preloaded algorithms that don't account for certain variables. Well, that's absolutely true, Shaq Bully, but I think you underestimate the power and the intelligence of those who are really don't have any authority to implement any cuts themselves or change the way money is appropriated. They're just exposing and they're presenting. Now, sure, that may need some review just to ensure that what they uncovered is accurate and valid. But automation and mining that mountain of data with technology, with information technology, is the only way to accomplish that. I don't want to hire thousands of bureaucrats to start going through printouts.
Which is why this was never done before, because the government only thinks one way. Throw money and people at it.
No doubt about it. So, but I hear you. I think it could be done methodically. It's the same thing with deportation, Shaq Bully, in my view. I'm all for deporting the illegals, starting with the bad guys. And Rhino just pointed out while we were on the break that I think it's great AG Pam Bondi is suing Governor Kathy Hochul of New York, as well as Letitia James in New York as well.
I figure she's now eating her words when she came out and said, no one is above the law.
Including you there, sweetie. Toots. Including you. It's a beautiful thing. So I love to see all this. Tom Homan, he's telling these mayors, these governors, don't stand in our way. Last time I checked, federal law is supreme to state. That's the way our system is set up. You stand in the way of federal law, you got a problem. You're committing a crime. You're obstructing. That's a crime last time I checked. I'm all for it. This public school apparatus is the definition of the swamp on the C Spire text line. I would describe it this way. The education community, I would submit, Rhino, is more protectionist of their domain than the political realm. What do you think?
That's about even.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you're giving a little more credit than I am to the political people in terms of
the political people have more actual power.
That's true.
The education people hold more soft power.
So why is Trump wanting the debt ceiling cut when he's promised when he's promised cutting spending? Okay, Thomas. It's math.
Because there's no way to cut the spending to a point that will not hit the debt ceiling in time. Therefore, if you have to argue, it's not worth it. You're not going to take this in. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. So why would I even try to explain it? Because you just want to be obtuse because you hate Trump.
Because he would be perfectly fine with telling Social Security and Medicare recipients, sorry, you ain't getting your money. Therefore, we could balance the budget and no longer need to borrow any money, thus raise the debt ceiling. That's the only way to do it at this point. The math doesn't work any other way. That ain't happening. That ain't happening. So, with respect to cuts, again, cuts mean cuts. He didn't say he was going to balance the budget. He said cut. We're out of here today. Back with you again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.